Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 3 of my O.D.S.T remix track walkthrough. In today's video we are going to be going through all of the instruments, so basically leads, plucks, pads as well, and how they were made and how they were fit into this track. So this is probably going to be a bit of a longer video compared to the others in this series. There is a lot to get through, so just bear with me. We're going to go through everything. Just to give you guys a real quick reminder, this is essentially what parts of the track sound like, so you can just remind yourself exactly what we're dealing with here. So have a listen to this. If this is your jam, then stay tuned. I'll show you how I made it. So that's just a really quick preview. Apologies for any kind of dropouts there. I am running a fully finished mixdown version of this track and obviously recording software. So I see this got up to like in the high 70s earlier. So hopefully this recording will still work. I guess we'll find out when it's done. But yeah, so apologies for that. But this is, yes, as I say, a fully mixed down version. So this is the version that was rendered and sent for mastering. So we're just going to go through the instruments, which there are quite a few. So the first one we're going to look at will be this this Bleeper track. So this kind of, it never really gets going as a kind of melody. It's just there to kind of keep up, just keep the track kind of going along. If I play it in like the early parts of the track, it sounds like this. Yes, that incredibly long reverb tail is entirely on purpose. So this is a Nexus 2 preset called Orchid Drops. We'll just quickly go through what I did to this now. So as you can see, it's slightly panned to the left to compensate for some of the other sounds that were panned a little bit to the right as well. Again, just all about kind of giving the track a stereo feel. As you can see here, I have kind of pushed up the release a bit, because I did really want to kind of accentuate the reverb tail of this sound. That's pretty much the only change I think I made for the most part on this plugin. Well, I did mute the reverb because I obviously created my own reverb send. We'll go through that in a bit. So again, okay, maybe unpredictable, but I think that's a good thing. You've got, we'll loop this section here. So I'll just take away the Camel Crusher, see what that sounds like without it. So it's a lot more kind of plucky sound, whereas this kind of really just gives it a bit more. And that then also you can hear that additional sound through with the distortion as well. The distortion, sorry, the reverb as well. So it gives it that really nice tail. Yeah, I did go on Soundgoodizer. I feel that this plugin gets a bad rap. It's probably used a lot mostly by people just starting out, without realizing, okay, this is one of those things you should usually be kind of more careful with. But in this case, I've just ramped it up to the max because it sounds good. At the end of the day, the only rule is if it sounds good, then it works. So this is it without Soundgoodizer. Again, very much plucky, kind of wanted to bring up that reverb tail that was already in the sound. And I think that definitely does the job. Next thing I've got is another E channel. Again, this will clean up the sound a little bit with some EQ cuts and some filter cutoffs. Can you hear that kind of distortion in the low end there? Putting this on just clears that right out. And then, well, there's nothing even going on in that EQ. Completely not needed in the end, so I can just delete that. And again, with the imager, like you can see here, I've slightly narrowed this signal with this. I find that quite a lot of the stuff from Nexus doesn't really translate too well straight out of the box, especially with stereos, especially with like the pads and stuff. They just seem to be really, really, really wide. So let's have a listen to this. See, straight out of the box with no other work on the imaging. Look at how much anti-phase is in this sound naturally. Remember, this is before it's even hit anything like a reverb, because the reverb is a send over here, channel 42. So this is how the sound comes from Nexus. So obviously taking this down, I think it was on 29%, just kind of helps get rid of that and clean up the sound from a stereo mono compatibility side of things. So that anti-phase now is way within acceptable limits now, in my opinion. So again, another really straightforward bit of work there for that sound. As I said before, if you find the right sounds, then the amount of work you should need to put into them should be relatively minimal by comparison. Whereas if you're trying to force a sound into a mix, you're going to spend a lot more time on it, and it might not even end up bearing any fruit. So, yeah, picking your sounds is the first part of making a good sounding mix, in my opinion. Now, all of these sounds here, they send to two places. They send to the instrument send. So this is just a place for me to apply just a really light sidechain, again, to kind of just give the kick a little bit more room to breathe, and any kind of filtering. This one just kind of lives with a high pass on it for 200. So that affects all the tracks. A little bit of compressing. This is the Waves V comp. It's okay. It's slightly different. It's a different sounding bus compressor to the one I used before, the SSL, which I used on the drums. Is it as good? I'm not sure, but it does give a different sound, and I do like the sound of this compressor for leads, which is why it's on here. And the last thing here is this glitch, which is just for one specific part of the track, so we won't worry about that too much. And the other place that this sends to is what I mentioned earlier. So this is the reverb send. So this reverb send is using Waves Renaissance verb, or R verb for short. The tail's quite long. It's 2.5 seconds. There's no pre-delay on it. And obviously it's 100%. The early refractions are off. The wet dries is 100%. So this is why I use it as a send. And for example, this track is sending 60% of the signal. So if I just play this without reverb, it sounds like this. And then if I put the reverb back in, just adds that little bit extra onto the sound, if you ask me. Again, I did switch the reverb off on this plugin because it was already got quite a nice lush tail to it, which is why I really like that sound. But I haven't really done too much at all to this out of the box. But then there's not so much you can do with Nexus, obviously, with it being a rompler and everything. So we'll move on now to the acid. So let me I'll solo this. So what did I use for the acid? I used Transistor Bass. I absolutely love this plugin. I fully recommend it. There are some fantastic free bassline VSTs out there, which I did do a video on, a couple of them. But obviously I paid extra for this. This is a paid plugin. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with FL straight away. At least I'm not sure it does. I bought Fruity Loops way before this plugin was invented, so it wasn't included in my all plugins bundle. I had to pay extra for it. Well worth the money. Wait for a image line sale if you want. You may have just missed one on Black Friday. There may be one coming up for Christmas. I don't know. 100% worth the money, whatever happens. It's up there, in my opinion, with Fossion, and I definitely prefer it to anything from Audio Realism Bassline. That's just my opinion, obviously. So this is, we'll give a quick listen to what this sounds like. Sorry, we'll just mute all of these. Okay, so it's panned ever so slightly to the left. As you can see, here is, so I've got a cut off, got a bit of volume automation depending on where in the track it is. Sometimes I needed to bump the volume up or down dependent. There is a constant high pass that kind of only really I've used it to kind of filter out at the end of transitions. There's a gate and a reverse on here. You can hear the difference they make here. The reverse is done using a free plugin called Backman, I believe, which is really cool. I definitely recommend adding this. It works better than some paid reversers that I can think of that I won't name here, but have a listen. So yeah, that's basically all that does. Just a couple of times in the track, it just reverses the signal. So let's go through in a bit more detail how this sound was made. So again, yeah, there we go. Camel Crusher, blank preset. I think I worked on this preset manually. Lots of distortion, tube and mech. A fair amount of compression. It's fairly straightforward what that does. I do obviously use the onboard distortion in Transistor Bass, but I haven't done, as you can see, I've dialed down on the drive a little bit to kind of, because I do prefer some external plug-in distortions. I mean, this distortion's fine, but it's just not very flexible. There's only 4 knobs after all, and you can't change the type. I know a lot of plugins offer loads of different types of distortion waveforms and stuff, especially like Trash 2, which is really good. But we've gone for just the standard Camel Crusher because I know the sound really well and I know how to manipulate it. Hardcore is another. I don't really use this that much. I was kind of struggling for my second distortion. I wanted to use something different, so I went with this. This is, I guess you could say, this is traditionally like for guitar kind of instruments and stuff, but I've used it here. Just kind of gives it that quite crunchy sound that I was really going for. Otherwise, it would just be a bit too prominent in the mix. Again, here compression. Now trigger gate. This is another really good free plugin. Just use this to kind of just make subtle differences to the MIDI notes. And again with the Ozone Imager 2, this one, as you can see, acids usually are quite often 100% mono, and this is almost there. don't even know actually why I did that. It doesn't seem to make any difference, does it? Obviously the signal's already fully in mono, so that's completely pointless. It happens, you know, I'm not perfect. So delay, maybe I should have actually put the ozone image behind the delay then if I didn't want it, because the delay would probably add stereo to it. Oh no, it's in mono, so it's fine. So this is what I really like this delay. I really didn't get on with Fruity Delay 2, but Fruity Delay 3 is really good. I use it in quite a lot of my stuff. So let's see if you can just hear the difference. Obviously I had to dial it down a little bit. We don't want too much delay. It's really easy to overcook the delay on this plugin, but as long as you dial down your wetness and your level, you should generally be okay. So that's it dry. And then if I put this on, it's really low. I didn't want it to take too much room up, but it's kind of just adds a little bit of depth to the sound. Next up I have L1 limiting. I've limited this quite harshly. There's definitely a little bit more going on there than there was in the previous limitings, like with the clap and stuff. This is a bit more limiting on. With acids, I find it's one of those sounds that you can take a bit more liberties with in terms of distortion and clipping, because it's kind of what you want in the sound almost. It definitely adds character. So I don't worry too much. I mean, it would have to be really overkill for me to be like, oh no, that's too much. But it's all about balance, and you know, trust your ears. If it works for you, then it works. At the end of the day, last part of this is just this filter. I think you can see the cutoff, which is just here. It's just for the high pass. So this low pass bit at the top, that never basically moves. I think that was 12.5. It doesn't actually make a difference right now because obviously the track's already done, but there we go. So that basically just cuts out all the low end below 250, because obviously as you can see this never drops below 250. It's just a real good way of cutting out, but also cutting out the low end, but also keeping it flexible in case for whatever reason you did want to put it back in there, maybe during a breakdown or a quieter moment. You know, you wanted to fill out the mix with some low end frequencies from this sound. You can do that with this with this method. So that's the reason why I chose that. With acids, I generally always do sometimes I even use more than this. There's a one sound that I find I can never get with 3 or 4 insert plugins ever. It's acids are always one that I know are going to take up a lot of bandwidth on my processor, but it is what it is at the end of the day, unfortunately. And that's if that's what you've got to do to make the sound work, then that's what you've got to do. So unfortunately my less is more principle doesn't really translate for acid and 303 sounds, but okay, it is what it is. So the next sound I'm going to look at is one that I skipped. So this is the Pluck sound next. So the Pluck works comes in before the acid. Well, the ARP and Pluck come in before the acid really do. But we'll go through those now for you. So we'll just solo the ARP. So this sound in the mix, or sound, I'll play this for you. So it just kind of sits in the background, drives the track along. Really like this sound. This is one of those moments when I kind of got to it. I was like, wow, okay, that's amazing. I will definitely be having that. So I did render it to audio, but I have kept the original plugin in. Or did I? No, that's okay. Yeah, here it is. Oh no, I didn't keep the plugin in. It's all audio. So the MIDI's in there still though. So this is what the audio rip sounded like just on its own. So it's quite thin without any additional work. So we'll just slowly start. We'll go through the plugins that I added. So the first thing in this case is, the first thing you should notice is there's no camel crusher. No camel crusher, because mainly for the reason because this was sitting more in the background of the mix. Didn't really feel that it needed any additional distortion. So the first thing that I added instead was the channel strip. Probably a bit too bright is the reason why I made these changes. And next EQ, just a resonant frequency, I believe this will be. Okay, next bit is the chorus. Just adds a tiny little bit of movement, and then again, bus compressor. And the last part, again, ozone imager 2. Not a massive amount taken out here. So most of this would have been done listening in comparison. So if I switch on, for example, the ARP and the acid. And then the pluck. So we'll do this bit here. See, so all of this done would have been done in comparison, because obviously you're not just working on a tune on a track in solo. You're obviously working on it in conjunction with everything else. So all of these decisions would have been made basically listening to other bits that it's competing with and saying, okay, this is where I want to fit, how I'm going to fit this sound into my overall mix. And then if I just switch on the whole thing. Can you hear the difference it means when I take the ARP out? Can you just listen carefully? You can kind of, it doesn't quite sound as full without the ARP in. And now I'm going to put it back in. It's only kind of, when you're at that level of that much going on, it's only a small difference. But when what you're talking about here is kind of marginal gains, you know, the final kind of 10% of your track is where the kind of the distinction between an okay tune and a good tune, or sounding tune at least, is made for me. So we're now going to go on to this lovely sound here, the Pluck. So this is 2 instances of, I believe, Viper. There we go. Again, my favorite. I absolutely love this sound. I don't know why. I just think it sounds really good. As soon as I heard that, I was like, okay, I can definitely put this kind of sound in and make it work without too much difficulty. Again, Camel Crusher, smashing out the tube distortion. Again, it sounds more like a traditional kind of trance pluck, but without it. But when you add it on, kind of just brings all of the kind of lushness from behind it into it, and it just sounds much less like just a standard pluck for me. Next up will be the Waves E channel. Again, the difference that makes is really noticeable. Definitely worth paying attention to channel strips, and using them more often. I find that the more I use channel strips, the more used to what I get, and the more I kind of like the sound overall. And it helps you not have a mixer rack full of plugins, because you've already got your EQs, your compressions and gates and stuff in one plugin. So definitely worth looking at. Now, Melder Autopan, this is another free plugin, and this is because I just wanted to add a bit of movement without putting on a chorus or a flanger or something like that, or any kind of modulation from within the plugin. So basically what this does is this slowly kind of just takes it from left to right, left to right. So I didn't have to worry about centering it or anything like that, because obviously the ARP is quite, not completely mono, but it is slightly, it is narrowed. Whereas this, I wanted this one to kind of float around the ARP and the acid as well to some extent. So if you just watch this line here, basically says how panned it is. Obviously I've reduced it to about a third, so it's only panning about a third worth of the sound. I didn't want to pan the whole thing, it would have been a bit too much. So just have a listen to the difference with it on and off. Just widens it a little bit, it just kind of takes it away from clashing with other elements as well, just by doing that very kind of very small touch. And then again, obviously, a last little bit of compression. Really tiny amount there. It really didn't need too much in order to fit in. And again, imager. This one I'm making a little bit more stereo, just give it a bit more width and kind of separate it from the sounds before it, the bleeper, the acid, and the ARP. And if you watch this one here in the middle, you'll see as well where it goes. If I make this a bit longer, you'll see where it goes from left to right quite clearly. So in the whole context of the mix, it sounds something like this. So the next sound you just heard there is bells. Now these only happen like 4 times in the course of the track. It's literally just kind of a way to go, okay, we're going from one part of the track to another. Yeah, really not much going on with these, really quite straightforward. Again, Viper, sorry, not sorry. I won't spend too much time looking at this because I said it only really plays 4 or so times in the track. So how is this done? We'll quickly go through Sound Goodizer again, this time using preset A. Screamo. So this is a distortion plugin from What About Production. I think is what WA stands for. This plugin is okay. I kind of just used it because you can quite often get their plugins really cheaply when they launch, so I quite often just pay a couple of quid for them, and sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not. This one, the jury is still out on for me. I haven't used it a whole great deal. I think I'm never really going to use this bit at the bottom, which is kind of like side chaining essentially. I don't think I'm ever going to use that. I'd much rather use the traditional, my tried and tested method of like a Dodge Pro, which is also a WA plugin, just for that kind of more traditional volume ducking. But yeah, so we'll go back to this anyway. This is this little bit of distortion, but a completely different timbre of sound to the Camel Crusher. I wanted it to have a different distortion and a different sound, so I chose that one. Now this EQ is basically taking out, there's some serious resonances in this, so when I take this out, this may sound absolutely awful. Really kind of screechy kind of sounds in there, so I'll play it on and off and you can decide for yourself if these EQ cuts were any good. Now the great thing about this is where this sound does play, it doesn't play. There's not usually much going on with it, so it doesn't have to compete with much. But at the same time, I don't want it to come out of nowhere and be really loud and really, you know, obnoxious sounding. So that's the reason why I did cut back on it a fair amount. But it was a taste thing because I felt it would fit better if it was a bit more subtle in the mix. So just to remind you what that kind of the job of this sound, it would be nice if I unmuted all the other tracks, wouldn't it? And it kind of just serves as a slight interlude before it goes into a different section of the track, which we're going to get into now. So the intro leads. Okay, this is going to be the fun bit, I think. So let me just going to need these automations. So intro leads. There is 2 layers of Viper and, you guessed it, another Viper. So these are panned slightly differently, I believe, is what's kind of going on here. Let's have a quick listen. I absolutely love this, the sound you can get out of the Viper. Yes, I was going for that kind of log and rag sound. Did I nail it? No, I'm not 100% on nailing it, but it works. So that's all that really matters. So yeah, 2 instances of Viper. Definitely worth an investment. I know I've said this before. The detune on this just sounds absolutely amazing. So if we can have a quick play around, we'll then just turning this detune up really kind of fattens this out. Listen. Definitely worth an investment from Adam Sarbo's website. A little bit more has been done to this. Now I have processed them on different channels because I did obviously want to thicken it up. It's essentially the same sound but with slightly different processing. So the first one is a mono version of the lead. So we'll just play that one soloed in a lower octave, obviously. Now this one's got kind of minimal processing on it, so it's just a bit of compression and a little bit of EQ. Yeah, really kind of dirties up the sound, but that's what it needs to be at that stage. That runs into the same channel as this one, so it's now sharing the processing with the upper octave. A lot cleaner. Okay, so first thing we've got here is we didn't need any additional distortion, hence why there's no Camel Crusher on here. This one will just be taking out some really. The one problem with this plugin, it does manage to find a lot of kind of ringy, horrible resonances in the mid or in the upper mid, but you can quite easily EQ them out. Like, have a listen to the kind of that this essentially cuts out. It definitely makes it so much more cleaner. Again, another channel strip. This will be doing a bit more on the compression side of things, I believe. EQ, I mean. This is where the compression is. It doesn't work here, but if I add this in, that's where that is. That's where that's for. Okay. My favorite analog sounding EQ. Again, this isn't a particularly clean EQ, but I do like the sound that it gets out, especially with boosts. Now, I did obviously want a bit more. Felt I needed a bit more in the high end, around about. So I boosted at what, nearly 3K and 8K. H delay. Now, absolutely love this. It's pretty much the only other delay unit I use along with Fruity Delay 3. Have a listen to the difference. Stick this in. Very subtle, very subtle. And then this is sending to an instrument send. Also, basically, we went through this already. Everything in this list here is being touched by, essentially goes to the instrument send. And of course, this is also sending, all of these are sending, or most of them anyway, are going through this synth send as well, which we also looked at. So that is, those are the instruments, the traditional kind of leads and plucks and stuff. The only other thing we really have to go through then next would be the pads during the breakdown section. So we'll just have a quick reminder about what they sound like. Loop this section here. This is the main part of it, I suppose. We're going to go have a look at the layers. So the first layer we're going to look at bass pad, essentially. So this is I forget what I used. This is a sample essentially that I resampled this from earlier in the production. Really quite straightforward. You don't know, no real surprises here. You know, pretty much really isolated the frequency that I want using this, and then obviously run it through Camel Crusher. This is what it sounded like without the EQ, by the way. You know, way too much going on there, and without the distortion, it's just a bit dull, really, isn't it? Compression will definitely keep it in check. And I'm pretty sure this was already off, so I'm not gonna look at that. Combine this with pad 1, which was now old school, yeah, I know, but this is one of my favorite kind of starting places for pad sounds. Is Synesthesia preset. Absolutely love it. It's not the most flexible plugin. I find that I find that it can be quite annoying to use. But if you want kind of to add in something a little bit more on the retro side of things, it's really good. It still stands up for me. I know it's old. I know it's only 32-bit and all that kind of stuff. But you know, if it serves the purpose, it serves the purpose, right? So let's have a listen to this sound. Just mute these ones. Little bit of a Evangelist kind of Blade Runner vibe almost. That's kind of what I was going for anyway, especially with this sound. The only thing that this really needed was a little bit, was a channel strip essentially for a few changes. You know, really not much. The main kind of stuff that's going on here is obviously that all of these pads are going through to the same reverb as all the instruments, and to ascend here as well, which I believe also includes the delay that you hear on that sound as well, because obviously the delay switched off on this plugin. So there's that, and then I'm going to add in pad 2. You probably all guessed this as soon as you heard it. Yeah, it's the old faithful Airwave Transsource 1. I would never use this sound on its own because it's been absolutely rinsed over the years. But if you can combine it, I find it's a really good starting place, and you can kind of combine it with other sounds to get something a little bit more unique. The real uniqueness I find for this this pad section comes pretty much from this one here, though. So it is I have changed the root note on it slightly. The others will probably be C5, and it is again another Nexus, but it's this preset here, Transceiver, and I've turned up the attack and release on this just to kind of really give it a bit more of an epic feel. So have a listen on its own, and I'll play it in context. I also switched off one of the oscillators because I didn't like oscillator 3, the noise that was coming out of that. Now the idea behind this one is, so as you can hear when I switch off the SSL channel, it's taken out a fair amount of the low and it's really boosted the highs. And the whole point with the slow attack and the slow release is it sounds like it comes in later than the other pads, but then it finishes later. It kind of throws the sound over into the next key change. So just have another listen and then listen out specifically for this sound, and that was exactly what I was going for, and I really like it. So lastly, we're just going to quickly go through what's on the pad send. So all 4 of these pads are going through to the pad send. The first thing I've got obviously is a bit of EQ, just to kind of clear up the sounds. Huge resonances going on there. Another E channel. One last touch of compression. Really kind of glues the sound together, that one does. Now this delay, nice and lush delay. Quite a big tail on that one. What you're hearing there is a reverb from the reverb send. So now the Dodge Pro, which is volume automation, is off at the moment. I automate it on here so that when it plays with the leads, it is also slightly sidechained. The same goes for this. This is just a little bit of gating to give the sound a bit more of a staggered. If I play it here. And then again, a filter, because obviously at this stage it's playing with the main lead, so you're going to want to kind of filter a bit out, make sure it doesn't take up too much room in comparison to the main lead. And last step is, again, once you've obviously combined like 3 leads, you're going to get quite an unruly sound, so you've got to kind of make sure that they fit into that mix. And this is definitely the finishing touch in quite a lot of my channels, as you've seen earlier throughout these videos. See, probably more anti-phase than actual normal. So now, last thing we're going to do here, we're just going to play the leads in conjunction with the pads. So if I was to just do this, this should work. So now you're going to have the leads and the pads. The pads just kind of, they're just there to kind of really fill out on the edges and slightly in the center as well, just kind of add a nice lush kind of texture that I'm not able to recreate just using reverb with the main lead, because The reverb is still one of those things that I feel like I'm always learning. So if I feel like it's missing reverb, something like this, I generally just will put a kind of pad, a version of the pads before it behind the main lead, just to kind of really fill it out and make it feel a bit more epic and lush. And the gating, the Alex Hilton A1 trigger gate that I put on, that again is just to make sure that it just doesn't overpower or kind of get too prominent in the mix. If I turn it off, it won't, in my opinion, it doesn't sound as good. It just gives it a bit more of a rhythmic feel as well. So that's the reason why I added that in. And that is the end of this video. So thank you for watching. I know it's been quite long, but I hope it has been informative. Last video to go will be just concentrating on some of the effects and stuff like that I've put in. So it probably won't be as long as this one, but I guess we'll see. But thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.